Evil doesn't always look dramatic. It doesn't always shout. Most of the time it whispers, it smiles, it blends in, it sits across from you at a table, looks you in the eye, and studies you the way a hunter studies terrain. The danger is not that evil exists. The danger is that most people are trained to ignore it, excuse it, or explain it away. You're told to be nice, to be understanding, to give the benefit of the doubt. That mindset doesn't make you moral. It makes you vulnerable. The first sign appears early, but most people miss it because it feels subtle. This person has no real accountability. When something goes wrong, it is never their fault. There is always a story, a justification, a reason why circumstances forced their hand. They don't say, "I was wrong." They say, "You misunderstood," or "Anyone would have done the same." Pay attention to this. A person without accountability has no internal brakes. If they can't own small mistakes, they will never hesitate to justify large ones. Evil doesn't begin with cruelty, it begins with self-exemption. The belief that rules apply to everyone else, but not to them. The second sign is emotional manipulation disguised as concern. This person knows how to press invisible buttons. They can make you feel guilty without raising their voice. They can make you doubt yourself while appearing calm and reasonable. They may say things like, "I'm only saying this because I care," right before they undermine your confidence. You walk away from conversations feeling smaller, confused, and strangely at fault, even when you did nothing wrong. That's not empathy. That's control. Evil doesn't need to dominate you physically if it can dominate your inner narrative. Once they control how you feel about yourself, the rest becomes easy. The third sign is a complete absence of empathy when it truly matters. They may perform empathy in public. They may say the right words, but when you are vulnerable, when there is nothing to gain, their concern disappears. Your pain becomes inconvenient. Your boundaries become obstacles. If you're hurt by their actions, they respond with annoyance rather than reflection. This is critical to understand. Real empathy creates restraint. A person who cannot feel the impact of their actions on others is capable of doing extraordinary damage because nothing inside them says stop. Evil is not rage-driven, it is indifferent. Indifference is far more dangerous than anger. The fourth sign is their relationship with truth. They lie easily, but more importantly, they don't respect reality. Facts shift depending on what benefits them in the moment. Conversations you remember clearly are suddenly never said. Promises become miscommunications. You start questioning your memory, your perception, your judgment. This isn't accidental. It's strategic. When someone destabilizes your sense of reality, they gain power. You stop trusting yourself and start relying on them to define what's real. That is psychological domination. Evil thrives where clarity collapses. The fifth sign is how they respond to boundaries. Healthy people may not like boundaries, but they respect them. An evil person sees boundaries as a challenge or an insult. When you say no, they push harder. When you pull away, they escalate. They may punish you with silence, anger, or subtle retaliation. They don't want mutual respect. They want access. Unlimited access. Boundaries expose them because boundaries signal strength, and strength is the one thing evil cannot tolerate unless it can control it. Here is what you must understand. Recognizing evil is not about becoming paranoid or judgmental. It's about survival. Good people often believe that if they explain themselves better, love harder, or stay patient longer, the situation will improve. It won't. Evil doesn't respond to kindness the way good people expect. It studies kindness, exploits it, and uses it as leverage. The most dangerous moment is when you start rationalizing their behavior, when you say, "They didn't mean it," or "They had a hard past," or "They're just damaged." Plenty of people suffer and don't become destructive. Pain explains behavior, but it does not excuse it. You are not obligated to sacrifice your peace on the altar of someone else's unresolved darkness. Strength is not aggression. Strength is clarity. Strength is knowing when to disengage without apology. Evil feeds on chaos, emotional reactions, and endless explanations. It weakens when met with calm distance and firm limits. You don't defeat it by confronting it emotionally. You defeat it by refusing access. If you're dealing with someone like this, understand this clearly. You do not owe them closure, understanding, or redemption. Your responsibility is not to fix them. Your responsibility is to protect your integrity, your mind, and your future. Walk away quietly if you must. Detach cleanly if you can. The most powerful move is not exposing them. It's becoming unreachable. Evil loses its grip the moment it realizes it can no longer influence you. Evil rarely announces itself. It doesn't walk into your life wearing a warning label or speaking in threats. It arrives polished, controlled, and often impressive. It knows how to blend in, how to earn trust quickly, how to make you feel safe enough to lower your guard. The first and most reliable sign that you are dealing with an evil person is not cruelty or anger, but something much quieter, a complete absence of accountability paired with a flexible relationship with truth. This combination is what allows everything else to happen. An evil person never truly takes responsibility for their actions. On the surface, they may appear articulate, even self-aware. They may talk about mistakes, struggles, or lessons learned. But listen carefully. There is always a hidden escape route. The blame is shifted, diluted, or redirected. If they apologize, it's conditional. I'm sorry you felt that way. I'm sorry, but you pushed me. I had no choice. Accountability requires ownership without justification. Evil cannot tolerate that level of self-exposure because it limits future behavior. If they admit fault, they would have to change, and change is a threat to control. When something goes wrong, watch how fast they build a narrative. Not a reflection, not a pause, but a story designed to protect their image and reposition themselves as the victim, the misunderstood one, or the only rational person in the room. This isn't emotional immaturity. It's strategic. Accountability creates limits. A person who refuses accountability believes limits are for other people. Their relationship with truth works the same way. Truth to them is not something objective. It is something adjustable. Facts bend depending on what benefits them in the moment. Conversations you remember clearly are reframed. Words they said with confidence are later denied with equal confidence. Commitments slowly dissolve into vague intentions. The goal is not just to avoid responsibility, but to destabilize your certainty. When you start questioning your own memory, your own perception, your own judgment, they gain leverage. This is where charm plays a role. Evil understands presentation. It understands that people trust confidence and composure, so lies are delivered calmly, without hesitation. There's no nervousness, no obvious tells. That's why they're convincing. People often assume liars look guilty. Skilled manipulators look relaxed. They look reasonable. They look offended that you would even question them. That reaction alone is often enough to silence doubt. Over time, you notice a pattern. Every conflict ends with you explaining yourself while they explain nothing. You're the one clarifying intentions, smoothing tension, trying to restore balance. They walk away unchanged. That imbalance is not accidental. It trains you to carry emotional responsibility that doesn't belong to you. Evil doesn't dominate by force first. It dominates by making you responsible for maintaining peace while they remain free to disrupt it. Excuses become their currency. Stress, trauma, upbringing, pressure, misunderstandings. These explanations are not used to grow or improve, but to shield behavior from consequences. There is a difference between understanding why someone behaves a certain way and allowing that explanation to erase accountability. Evil weaponizes empathy. It counts on your desire to be fair, compassionate, and reasonable. It knows you don't want to be the person who judges too quickly, that hesitation gives them time and access. Watch how they respond when confronted with clear facts, not accusations, just facts. A healthy person may feel uncomfortable, but they will engage with reality. An evil person becomes defensive, dismissive, or subtly aggressive. They may accuse you of being dramatic, sensitive, or confused. The goal is not to resolve the issue. The goal is to make you drop it. Once they learn that pressure makes you retreat, they will use it repeatedly. What makes this especially dangerous is consistency. Anyone can avoid accountability once. Anyone can lie under pressure. But an evil person shows a pattern, the same behavior across different situations, different people, different consequences. Always an explanation, never ownership. Always a reason, never restraint. That pattern tells you something fundamental about their internal structure. There is no internal authority guiding their behavior, no moral checkpoint that says, "This is where I stop." People often ask why someone like this doesn't change, even when confronted, even when relationships fail. The answer is simple. Accountability would require them to see themselves accurately. Truth would require them to accept limits. Both threaten the identity they've built, so instead, they double down. They refine their stories, they sharpen their charm, they get better at hiding. The most dangerous mistake you can make is assuming that clarity will fix this, that if you explain yourself better, gather more evidence, or communicate more calmly, they will suddenly take responsibility. They won't. Clarity threatens them. It removes ambiguity, and ambiguity is where they operate best. Evil depends on confusion, self-doubt, and emotional exhaustion. It survives by staying just reasonable enough to avoid exposure, just charming enough to maintain access, and just evasive enough to avoid accountability. Once you see this clearly, the illusion breaks. You stop debating facts that were never up for debate. You stop expecting honesty from someone who uses truth as a tool, not a principle. Recognizing this sign is not about labeling people. It's about protecting yourself from a dynamic that will slowly erode your confidence, your stability, and your sense of reality. When someone consistently avoids accountability and reshapes truth to suit themselves, they are showing you exactly who they are. The danger is not believing them. The danger is believing their stories instead of their patterns. Manipulation is rarely obvious at the beginning. If it were loud or aggressive, most people would recognize it and walk away. Instead, it's subtle, controlled, and often wrapped in what looks like concern. An evil person doesn't rush to dominate your actions first. They work on your perception. They understand that if they can influence how you see yourself and how you interpret situations, control becomes effortless. The process usually starts with emotional calibration. They study you. They listen carefully, not to understand you, but to learn where you're soft, where you doubt yourself, where you seek approval. Early on, they may seem unusually attentive. They remember details. They ask thoughtful questions. This creates trust. Trust lowers defenses. Once that happens, the manipulation begins slowly and strategically. One of their most effective tools is guilt, not the obvious kind, but the quiet, lingering kind that makes you question your motives. They may imply that you're selfish for having boundaries or ungrateful for questioning their intentions. Statements like, "After everything I've done for you," or "I thought you were different," are not expressions of hurt. They are pressure points. The goal is to make you prioritize their emotional comfort over your own clarity. As manipulation deepens, confusion sets in. Conversations feel circular. You raise a concern and somehow end up defending yourself instead. The original issue disappears, replaced by a debate about your tone, your timing, or your sensitivity. This isn't poor communication, it's redirection. By shifting the focus, they avoid accountability while placing you in a position of self-doubt. Over time, you become hesitant to speak up at all. because every attempt leaves you feeling worse. Reality distortion is central to this process. They don't just lie. They reframe events in ways that subtly undermine your confidence. Things you remember clearly are questioned. Emotions you felt strongly are minimized. You're told you're overthinking, imagining things, or being dramatic. At first, you push back. Eventually, you pause. That pause is where control begins. When you stop trusting your instincts, you start relying on theirs. An evil manipulator understands emotional reactions. They know when to apply pressure and when to withdraw. If confrontation arises, they may suddenly become calm, soft-spoken, even reasonable. This contrast makes you appear unstable by comparison. You may find yourself apologizing simply to restore peace. That apology is not resolution, it's reinforcement. It teaches them that emotional discomfort will make you fold. They also weaponize validation. Praise becomes conditional. Approval is given when you align with their expectations and withdrawn when you don't. This creates an invisible leash. You start adjusting your behavior, your opinions, even your values, just to maintain harmony. You tell yourself you're being flexible or mature, but what's really happening is erosion. Bit by bit, your emotional independence is being dismantled. Isolation often follows, not always physically, but psychologically. They may subtly undermine your relationships by questioning other people's intentions or framing themselves as the only one who truly understands you. I'm the only one who tells you the truth. They don't really care about you like I do. This creates dependency. The more isolated you feel, the more power they gain. Support systems are dangerous to manipulators because they restore perspective. What makes this especially damaging is that manipulation doesn't feel like abuse in the moment. It feels like confusion, like exhaustion, like constantly trying to fix something you can't quite name. You spend energy analyzing conversations, replaying words, wondering what you did wrong. Meanwhile, they remain steady, unaffected, and in control. That imbalance is intentional. The longer this dynamic continues, the more your emotional stability deteriorates. You may notice increased anxiety, indecision, or a constant sense of walking on eggshells. You second, guess simple choices. You hesitate before speaking. This is not because you're weak. It's because your inner compass is being interfered with. Manipulation works by disrupting self-trust. An evil person doesn't need to break you openly. They just need you unsure enough to stop resisting. Once that happens, they can guide outcomes without force. You comply not because you agree, but because it's easier than the emotional cost of pushing back. Peace becomes your priority, even if it's false peace. Understanding this keynote is not about becoming suspicious of everyone. It's about recognizing patterns. Consistent confusion, chronic self-doubt after interactions, emotional pressure disguised as care, and conversations that leave you feeling diminished rather than resolved. These are not normal relational struggles. They are signals. Manipulation is powerful because it hides behind normal human emotions, care, concern, love, loyalty. An evil person uses these emotions not to connect, but to control. Once you see that distinction clearly, the spell weakens. You stop explaining yourself endlessly. You stop internalizing blame that doesn't belong to you. You stop negotiating with someone who benefits from your uncertainty. The moment you begin trusting your perception again, manipulation loses its foundation. Control requires your participation, even if it's unconscious. When clarity returns, the dynamic shifts. Emotional fog lifts, reactions slow, and the invisible strings lose tension. An evil manipulator cannot survive in an environment where reality is stable and self-trust is intact. Boundaries are the line between who you are and who you allow access to you. To a healthy person, boundaries are normal. They create structure, respect, and safety. To an evil person, boundaries are a threat. They are the moment control is challenged and entitlement is exposed. That is why nothing reveals someone's true nature faster than the word no. At first, their reaction may be subtle, a slight shift in tone, a look of disappointment, a comment that feels off. They may say they understand, but their behavior says otherwise. This is a test. They are measuring how firm you are, how easily you can be moved, how uncomfortable you are with asserting yourself. If you soften your boundary to avoid tension, they learn something valuable. They learn that pressure works. When boundaries are enforced, escalation often follows. It may come as guilt, silence, passive aggression, or sudden anger that feels out of proportion to the situation. This reaction is not about the boundary itself. It's about loss of access. An evil person does not see boundaries as mutual respect. They see them as denial. Denial of influence, denial of control, denial of entitlement. They may accuse you of changing, of becoming distant, of being selfish or ungrateful. These accusations are designed to pull you back into compliance. The message underneath is simple. Your autonomy is a problem. Your independence disrupts the dynamic that benefits them. Instead of reflecting on why the boundary exists, they attack the boundary holder. Pay attention to how quickly respect turns into resentment. When someone values you, boundaries may disappoint them, but they will adjust. When someone values access to you more than you, boundaries feel like betrayal. That emotional shift is revealing. It shows that the relationship was never about mutual regard. It was about availability. An evil person often frames boundaries as cruelty. They may position themselves as the wounded party, suggesting that your limits are causing harm. This reversal of roles is intentional. It places emotional responsibility back on you. You start feeling guilty for protecting yourself. You start questioning whether you're being too harsh. This guilt is the doorway they use to regain control. If guilt doesn't work, punishment may. Silence becomes a weapon. Affection is withdrawn. Cooperation disappears. This is not emotional distance for self-regulation. It's a tactic. The goal is to associate boundaries with loss and discomfort, so you hesitate to enforce them again. Over time, you may find yourself preemptively abandoning your own limits just to keep the peace. What makes this dangerous is consistency. Every boundary is met with resistance. Every attempt at autonomy is met with pressure. That pattern tells you something essential. This person does not want a relationship with you. They want unrestricted access to you. They are not interested in who you are when you are whole. They are interested in who you are when you are pliable. Evil reacts strongly to boundaries because boundaries expose power dynamics. When you say no and mean it, you reclaim authority over your time, energy, and decisions. That shift threatens anyone who relies on influence rather than mutual respect. It removes their ability to manipulate outcomes quietly. Some people hope that if they explain their boundaries clearly enough, the other person will finally understand. Explanation is rarely the issue. Boundaries are understood the first time. They are resisted because they interfere with desire. Repeating yourself does not increase clarity. It increases their opportunity to wear you down. An evil person may comply temporarily, just long enough to restore access. They may appear respectful, patient, even apologetic. This is not growth, it's adaptation. The boundary is not accepted internally. It is tolerated until it can be bypassed. Watch actions, not words. Real respect is consistent, even when it's inconvenient. The moment you enforce a boundary without justification, something shifts inside you. Your nervous system settles. Your thinking becomes clearer. You feel more grounded. That internal change is noticeable to people who rely on your uncertainty. They sense the loss of leverage. That is often when their behavior becomes more obvious. You may notice an increase in control attempts. Sudden urgency, manufactured crises, emotional appeals designed to override your judgment. These are not coincidences. They are efforts to regain the position they once held. The more stable you become, the more unstable they may appear. It's important to understand that you are not responsible for how someone reacts to your boundaries. Discomfort is not harm. Disappointment is not abuse. Anyone who frames your self-protection as an attack is revealing their priorities. Boundaries do not create conflict, they reveal it. Walking away is sometimes the only boundary that cannot be negotiated. Distance removes access entirely. For someone who thrives on influence, that is devastating. Not because they lost you emotionally, but because they lost control. Silence, clarity, and consistency are powerful deterrents. An evil person does not change because of boundaries. They are exposed by them. The reaction tells you everything you need to know. When someone shows you that they cannot tolerate limits, believe them. Boundaries are not walls to punish others. They are filters that protect your peace and reveal who was never entitled to your access in the first place.